Thumbing through Steam's ridiculously vast lists of new releases on a regular basis is a daunting and draining task. Game after game, page after page, you often find nothing but asset flips and half-arsed attempts of questionable game design that would make even the worst of Flash games seem somewhat palatable. It is something that over time makes you look at even some of the more promising titles with some skepticism and caution. But every once in a while, I do find a game that I just know I need to cover it from the very moment that I look at its store page. And the game we're looking at today is one such game. Medieval Kingdom Wars is an RTS and grand strategy hybrid that is developed and published by Reverie World Studios and released out of early access January 3rd, 2019. Medieval Kingdom Wars combines elements of other games like the Total War series but in real time, with that of the RTS genre and roguelike progression, creating an in-depth, complex and intense gameplay where every strategic move and battle feels it matters. But the game does suffer from the lack of some much needed quality of life improvements, somewhat clunky UI, fairly long load times and occasional performance issues. Before getting into the bulk of the gameplay itself, I want to discuss Medieval Kingdom Wars' excellent tutorial. The tutorial acts as both an introduction to the campaign along with showing and explaining how the game works across a total of 9 separate chapters. Each chapter introducing new mechanics and progression in the backstory. From how to use town defences effectively to travelling around the world map to managing your kingdom and conquering others, to naval combat and sieges. There isn't much it doesn't cover. Step by step it carefully and thoroughly explains all the ins and outs of each individually, while allowing you to put your lessons into practice with scenarios that apply to that tutorial step. And in the process you get to experience what led up to the beginning of the 100-Year War that started in 1337, the time that the game is set in. The tutorial is completely optional. Players can go straight into the campaign without having to run the tutorial if they so wish to do so. But with Medieval Kingdom Wars being quite different from other games, it is worth doing. And as far as tutorials go, they don't get much better than Medieval Kingdom Wars does. At the start of a campaign you get to choose what country you are fighting for, along with what lord of that country you wish to take the role of, generally there being around 3 of them to choose from. Each lord having their own levels of renown and standing with the country. Renown being how well known they are for their deeds, and their standings being how favourable the king is towards them. Once you've chosen who to fight for and the lord that you're going to take the role of, your mission begins. The ultimate objective of the game is to overthrow your king, taking the throne for yourself, and then finally conquering the entire of Western Europe. To do this you will need to use a combination of strategic diplomacy and combat, but how exactly you go about your objectives is entirely up to you. You can stay on good terms with your king, serving him loyally while you plot to overthrow him, or you can simply attempt to take the throne from the very beginning. The choice is entirely up to you. The gameplay is separated into 3 core systems, those systems being world map, the management of your towns and cities, and battles, each working quite different from the other and having their own functions and purposes. We'll start with the world map. This is where more of your tactical play will take place. While on the world map you can move and organise your armies, collecting taxes from towns, researching new technologies, making diplomatic movements, and travel to and attack new territories. The entire world map working in real time as opposed to the turn-based strategy of most other games. At the beginning of the game you will only have one army, but once you've overthrown the king you are able to recruit new lords, giving them plots of land, increasing your number of armies. While moving through the map you simply select the army and right click where you want them to go. During this you can speed up how time moves on by increasing it at the top of the screen to make time pass or your armies move quicker. This too results in the player being able to move the game forward while awaiting more silver to come in with tax. Silver is the game's currency and main resource. It is extremely useful as you aren't waiting for what would otherwise feel like ages as you patiently wait for time to go by to collect the next batch of tax. It is a great way to keeping the pace of the game flowing and never leaving you stuck before being able to make your next big move. You can transfer units to and from your army, either increasing a town's defense or your army's overall power. All you need to do is move your army to a town and click the option to transfer units and switch them between your army and the town. It is a really useful mechanic that allows you, assuming you have the correct preparations, to reinforce your army's ranks when they are low, or adding units to your town for added defense against incoming attacks. This becomes especially crucial as you progress in the game, gaining additional armies, allowing you again with the correct preparations to quickly regain an army's ranks and continue on your mission of conquest. While it is a mechanic that sounds simple on paper, it nevertheless requires a tactical approach, as you need to keep a balance between town defences and your army's strength. As the more soldiers you have across your empire, the higher upkeep you must pay, ultimately resulting in gaining less tax income, limiting your abilities to use services that require money such as diplomacy, research resources, and funding to hold siege battles. So a tactical approach is always needed no matter how powerful your empire is, and it works really well in harmony with the other mechanics of the game. As for diplomacy, this works through your Chancellor. one of 4 advisors at the bottom right of the screen. This allows you to increase your standings with your king and form alliances with other kingdoms, for a price of course. You can send a gift of money, generally over 800 silver, or you can offer a plot of land that is under your rule. Alternatively, you can also spend the money on attempting to spread ill rumours about a king, hoping for the population to become angry with him, ultimately causing an uprising. This too costing silver to use, and there isn't a guarantee of success with it. The diplomatic options of the game are very basic at this moment, with other games offering a far more in-depth and complex system that makes them feel dull in comparison here. But the developer does intend on adding new mechanics to the diplomatic system, including trade agreements and various alliances as the game's development progresses. Research tree on the other hand are quite impressive. The available research of the game is separated into 12 categories, including trade, diplomacy, military, siege warfare and defense, just to name a few, each category having its own number of research upgrades to them. Each upgrade requires a certain amount of resources, those being tools, gold, dyes and all other manners of trade goods. These are obtained by defeating armies on the world map and defeating pirates in naval battles, or by buying them from the research screen in exchange for silver. The cost of each of these goods depending on their rarity. Each town you have under your rule also produces a number of these goods each month in accordance with what goods they produce. The research plays one of the more important roles in the overall tactical play of Medieval Kingdom Wars. Not only is it crucial to use it to keep up the advancements of other empires, but you need to balance its cost out with all the other features that require silver. It leaves you having to make decisions such as choosing between buying goods for a new research technology, or keeping your money for upcoming siege battles, or upgrading the size of a town, or any other possible need for the currency. The research adds a huge level of strategy to the game because of this, overall making the whole experience massively in depth, while also adding in its own level of tactics to the game, with having to decide what research is important to you at the moment in time, and buying the goods needed for that specific research. It has you always thinking and having to plan ahead in order to get an advantage over your enemies, while also not leaving yourself stuck in a tight spot with conquest. It is quite brilliant from a gameplay standpoint. If there was one problem I would have with research, however, it would be the upgrade descriptions. The descriptions themselves are found in writing, but how they are displayed could be done a lot better. When you hover over an upgrade to see what you get with it, the unlock is also placed in with the description. It results in you having to read the entire description in order to figure out what the upgrade unlocks. While the descriptions are very short, having to do it over and over again gets very tedious after some time. Indeed, the unlocks are highlighted using icons, but you still need to hover the cursor over each of them to understand what they are. A better approach to this would be to keep the upgrades information separate to that of the description, highlighting in bullet points what the unlocks are in between the research description and the icons. This would enable the player to instantly know what that particular research unlocks without having to read through a description or hover over icons. It would be a much more efficient approach to the interface. But aside from that problem, the research works extremely well, adding in a whole new level of tactics and strategy to an already staggering amount of complexity the game has. When you select a town, a number of options are given to the player, those being enter city, collect taxes, create army, upgrade city, recruit units and rename city. Collecting taxes gives you whatever silver is currently available for you to collect from the selected town. You can also click on the collect all tax on the top left of the screen to collect all taxes from each town in your empire. Create an army allows you to make a new army to march forth and continue your conquest. This is only available once you become king and assign lords plots of land where you can raise an army. Recruit units allows you to spend silver in order to hire new soldiers to your city that can then be used to defend it or transfer to your army. And rename city allows you to change the name of the city. Upgrade city allows you to increase the size of the city, allowing for an additional building to be constructed at the cost of silver for each upgrade. There is also a box to the right of this list of options that shows the buildings of that city. You can level up current buildings along with constructing new ones if you have the room to do so at the cost of silver. These options are useful to have as they are a fast way of recruiting new soldiers and upgrading your city, perfect for emergency situations assuming you have the silver to spare. But the bulk of the city management and building takes place under the enter city option. What this does is brings you into an RTS style gameplay with the city that you've chosen to enter. Here is where you can gather resources such as wood and food with serfs, essentially your peasants or peons, and your iron and stone mines accumulating stone and iron. You can then use those 4 resources to train new units, construct new buildings, conduct research to improve the town, and upgrade current buildings and town's defences. This allows you to not only completely fortify your town without the need of spending silver, but can also train troops, livestock, horse and cart and siege equipment that can then be added to your army using the unit transfer option on the world map. all of which are essential for laying siege upon cities and towns in your conquest. But there is a downfall to using this inexpensive method of training and construction. That downfall being that the population don't like you intervening and bossing them around for long periods of time, resulting in unhappiness growing the longer you are there. If the population become too unhappy, it can cause an uprising and they will begin to revolt against you. With each in-game month that passes, that unhappiness lowers again, allowing you to come back and add some more work without worrying about the citizens getting angry with you. Just like with a world map, while in a city, you can increase the game speed to a maximum of double, allowing you to get the things needed done without having to play at normal speed, keeping the overall flow of the game running smoothly. It is with the RTS style of gameplay when entering a city that Medieval Kingdom Wars really presents its real identity, an identity that sets it apart from those it inspires from, and giving it its unique feel. It is a feature that works exceptionally well, where it gives you the option to build and train inexpensively, but the increase in unhappiness forces you to be tactical about it. Not only does it work from a gameplay standpoint, it gives a sense of ownership to each and every town. It makes it feel like you really have built each and every town in your empire from the ground up, from a tattered ruin left behind from warfare to a bustling city or thriving hamlet. You build up these ruined establishments and make them prosper with your own hard work and patience. It is a wonderful feeling. It may sound like it involves a lot of micromanaging, having to do this with every town and city in the game, but that's not quite the case here. As you progress in the game and continue to take over more territory, older towns begin to become obsolete to you other than their economic value. Eventually you will have a town that surrounds others, protecting them, or even entire islands mostly cut off from the opposition. This results in you only actually having to manage those towns and cities that are playing a role in your continued mission. So there is never any need to actually manage a whole bunch of towns at the same time, eliminating the repetitiveness and busy work that micromanaging can bring. It is a really well designed mechanic, and one that works extremely well despite its very different strategic approach to that of the world map. Then there are the siege battles. These work very similar to that of managing your town, with the exception you are battling a city that is often very heavily fortified and contains a lot of enemy battalions. When starting a siege, it is recommended you bring livestock for food, several serfs and a horse and cart that acts as a mobile resource drop-off for your gathering serfs. When beginning with a siege battle, you are often with a disadvantage, that being you need to build your encampment from the ground up. This often takes time, resulting in your approach generally being holding off incoming waves of troops while you better ready your encampment for training and construction. The challenges that you face with siege battles is that you're very limited to how many buildings you can construct, along with having to win the battle within the amount of silver you have. As time passes with the battle, your silver slowly begins to lower. Run out of silver and you will be forced to abandon the siege. It is also worth noting, and this is poorly explained in the game, the unlocked technology and upgrades you gain from research must be applied to each town and city individually. So if you have an armory in your capital city and have researched the upgrades for the soldiers' defense, the effects will only apply when the capital city is under attack. This means when laying siege to a city, you will have to build an armory at the encampment and then research the upgrades before they are applied to the units on the battlefield. This results in you carefully needing to plan what buildings you require, choosing between military and industrial constructions due to the requirement for iron and stone also. Adding a real layer of strategy to siege battles, where it is more than just a case of who has the bigger army wins. It is overall a better experience for it. As for the combat itself, it is equally as deep in complexity. Each type of unit has its own advantages and disadvantages. For example, archers are extremely effective against weaker and lesser armoured units, while against heavier armoured units they can't damage at all. While macemen are extremely effective against heavily armoured units, they aren't as effective against others. Learning what types of units are powerful against others is extremely important, but it is something that is explained in detail in the tutorial. Along with that, there are a number of different combat stances and formations that each have their own uses, and if applied correctly can really turn a battle around. A loose formation is useful when being bombarded from a range, with a tight formation being useful when attempting to stop enemy units getting through a passage or gateway. Combat stances include attack, where units will seek and kill enemy units, while defensive is where they only attack if they are attacked first. And then you have stand your ground, where the units go into a defensive mode that is useful for holding off enemies in tight places, while ranged units make quick work of them. Each of the stances and formations, when applied correctly, can make a huge difference in battle, resulting in what would otherwise be considered the underdog being the actual victor. Even if you're outnumbered, with the correct strategy and the right orders at the right time, you can still make it through a battle relatively unshaved. Along with that, as you progress in the game unlocking new technologies, you unlock new unit abilities, such as archers having fire arrows and siege weapons that fire flame projectiles, each of which is extremely effective against buildings and siege weapons, along with you being able to place oil on the ground as a defense, then setting it alight, burning enemies in its path. Overall, it is real-time strategy at its most complex and thrilling, resulting in siege battles that are spectacular to experience and satisfactory to win. But the siege battles are not without their problems. Firstly, very big siege battles have major performance issues, especially since the last patch that was supposed to fix the problem. I found for me it actually made it slightly worse, to the point I couldn't record the big ones even though my PC meets the recommended requirements and having the game at the lowest graphical settings. With more powerful computers this probably won't be so much an issue, but for those closer to the recommended system requirements, from my experience, may cause problems. Secondly is the unit's pathfinding, which is a bit wonky. I often had serfs bringing resources back to a drop-off point that was actually further away rather than the one that was closer. Occasionally the large group that a single unit consists of have individual men that tend to stray off in different directions to the rest of the group. As to whether this affects the damage output of the whole unit, I can't tell for certain, but it is doubtful. But nevertheless, it takes away from the absorption of the game as you see single soldiers going in the opposite direction to the others of the unit. Along with that, it is hard to get a large group of units to a specific location where you want them. Often 1 or 2 units straggling behind, leaving them standing further back than you ordered them to, and then not attacking the enemy due to being out of range. I also found it is difficult to tell what units are damaging what. There is no real feedback with the units during combat. You just see the soldiers of the units keeling over one by one without really knowing who is slaughtering them. For all you know, it could be the melee units or it could be the ranged. It is near impossible to tell. The final issue is with the latest update, ranged units have been majorly nerfed, maybe even a bit too much. At least prior to the update, the ranged units had an impact on the battle, but now I'm not even sure they're doing any damage at all, something that is even further made difficult to judge due to the previously mentioned combat feedback. These issues with the siege battles really dampened the impact of the game, especially with them being one of the biggest selling points of the game. The only major problem though is the performance issue, while others are more minor frustrations than anything else. But it is these problems more than anything else that reflects my review score of the game. Despite the problems, the siege battles of Medieval Kingdom Wars are thrilling, and the performance problem I encountered likely won't affect most others, especially those with high-end computers. It certainly needs a lot more work, but I have no doubt that the developer will continue to work towards polishing and fixing the problems that the siege battles currently have. As for field and naval combat, they work in a similar manner as siege battles, but without the building and construction. Instead, you simply fight with what units you have in your army. Field combat naturally takes place on land, while naval combat is done over a series of connecting boats, which really tests your abilities with formations and stances. They too naturally have most of the issues that the siege combat does, though no frame drops and overall are still a joy to experience and play nevertheless. The final feature to cover is the roguelike progression system of the game. The game saves automatically on a constant basis, so every move you make and every action you take is saved instantly. This results in the player not being able to save and load the game if a mistake is made. While it isn't a mechanic that is for everyone, it makes for extremely intense gameplay, where every strategic move in every battle feels like it is meaningful, and that it will have consequences in one form or another. And with no way to revert those mistakes, it is up to you to recover from them in every way that you can. In addition to the campaign, there is also a skirmish mode. This essentially allows for a quick battle either with an AI or against other players if you so wish to play online. It is a nice little feature that allows you to simply play out a battle without having to worry about the world map. As a whole, the gameplay to Medieval Kingdom Wars, even with its issues, is still a wonderful experience where all its mechanics come together to work in perfect harmony with each other, to bring you a complex and intense strategy experience like nothing you've played before. And as time goes on and the game continues to be improved, as it has done since its 1.0 launch, I feel that it is going to turn into something utterly amazing. The visuals of Medieval Kingdom Wars are quite typical of that what you'd come to expect of a small indie development. They are quite rough to say the least. Not so much with the environments, but with the character models it is certainly more obvious. The biggest issues with the visuals are that almost every character in the game, especially units, share the same facial and bodily structures, the only difference being the armour that they wear in accordance to the unit type and facial and hairstyles that a character has. It is very obvious that most are just variations of the same character model. Along with that, each of the different army's units are exactly the same in design. They have no uniqueness to their appearance in accordance to their culture. It isn't a major problem, but when you play a game that consists of so many varying cultures, you do hope to see a difference in their army's design. But credit where it is due, the cities do have their accurate cultural variants, which does make up for the lack of it with the army design. I don't expect a 3-man development team to be able to produce such a variety of design like that of a AAA company. Doing so would be unrealistic and unfair. But some change, even slight significant ones, would be nice. With that said, however, it is a problem that the developer is aware of and are planning on addressing in the future, stating they fully intend on giving each army their own accurate cultural and historical appearance. As a whole, the visuals are pretty good for such a small development team, and overall do get an acceptable pass. But once the developer implements the very design of the armies, a lot of that visual stagnation that is currently there will be eliminated. The atmosphere to Medieval Kingdom Wars is great and fits in with the medieval setting of the game, while on the world map a much slower track plays, giving a more relaxed feel as you sit back planning your next move, often consisting of violins and hymns with subtle notes of a piano playing in the background. It makes you feel like a king, sitting with his advisors looking at a map and plotting his next course of action in his mission of conquest. It works brilliantly. The combat on the other hand ramps up the music tenfold, no longer there being subtle instruments but instead all taking the spotlight. Violins, lutes, pianos, hymns and other instruments I'm not even going to begin attempting to name. All play in perfect harmony to symbolise war, desperation, struggle and conflict all in one. It really helps bring the battles to life, absorbing you into the game ever more. It is a sort of soundtrack that truly makes you feel you are in the medieval era, and that war is only ever just around the corner, and that is exactly what you want to feel when playing such a strategy game. Medieval Kingdom Wars is a strategy game I've waited years to play. Complex, in-depth and intense, where every action, every move and every battle are meaningful. And each strategic mechanic works in complete harmony with the other, creating a massive level of depth to the gameplay and tactics of the game. The world map, the town management and building, the research, the diplomacy and the battles, everything works together seamlessly. Despite its numerous issues, the combat still holds up well, with massive battles of epic proportion that with the right tactics on the player's behalf can go from certain defeat to the greatest comeback of all time. Medieval Kingdom Wars may have its problems right now, but it is nevertheless a good game that is well on its way to greatness. And with that, I give Medieval Kingdom Wars a 7 out of 10. Medieval Kingdom Wars for me is like the Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl of strategy games. It may have had a rocky launch with more than a fair share of problems, but nevertheless I absolutely love it for its uniqueness and excellent design. It may only be at a point where I can call it good right now, but as more fixes are applied and intended features implemented, I can see Medieval Kingdom Wars not just being an excellent game, but one that could possibly redefine its genre, and you can bank on me returning to re-review it when that time comes.